We decided to split the presentation in two parts. I will try in the first 10 minutes to sketch the theoretical part, thinkers who inspired us in our research, and the fact then we'll try to look at the more applicative part and the research side of our study. So in this article, which has been written a few months ago, but it was based on all the research, we will try to analyze the extent in which ideas of two philosophers from the 20th century. One is Robin George Collingwood, the English philosopher, who did the first part of the 20th century, and Jürgen Habermas, the German philosopher who is still alive and kind of covers the second half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. Their ideas of group religious behavior and the way this is still relevant within the modern paradigm of social machines and cyber communication. Our approach, we consider it as a tool for analyzing conceptually and statistically how various components of society's life, and we focused mainly on religion, influence the online behavior of cyber agents. According to the first philosopher, who had a lot of insightful understanding of the crisis of the 1930s society, in the emotions expressed publicly, the so-called informed emotions, when they are projected at the mass level, can induce in other people, in the recipients, the message, can induce in other similar emotions, which, if they are aroused, when they are aroused, become automatically intelligent or rational because of the rational form embedded in these emotions. This idea resonates, we discovered, surprisingly well with Jürgen Habermas's account on religion's self-reflective epistemicity in what he calls the post-secular society. This idea was expressed over 65 years later. Collingwood idea, so we somewhere in the middle of last decade, 2005. I think, when the world was supposedly facing different challenges, but as we see the very, very recent events, the world is facing more or less the same challenges as it in the previous decades. In order to meet the requirements of the digitalized world, religious organizations need to meet the expectations raised by these new types of socializing and communication, which means to be attractive, to be entertaining, to be meaningful and authentic, but also engage in the general social and political dialogue. And lastly, as I said, the study would place the ideas such as within the context of social machines, rapport with the online social behavior in general. And I will briefly mention, I'll make one quotation from Habermas, who in an important lecture he delivered at San Diego University said, secular awareness of living in a post-secular society gains a sophisticated articulation. Yet the liberal state faces in both regards the problem that religious and secular citizens can only acquire these self-reflective attitudes towards a complementary learning process, which the state cannot influence by its own means of law and politics. Over 70 years before that, the Oxford philosopher Robert George Collingwood was initiating a similar process by attempting to reconcile the emotional and intellectual sides of religion in general, or religious experience in particular. And in the wake of his early work focused on intellectual aspects of religion, and under the gloomy historical circumstances of the 1930s, especially the late 1930s Europe, he began to work on the idea of religion as containing a driving force or a pulsating life, able to provide our system of beliefs and principles with emotional strength and fervor. This picture of religion appears clearly and incidentally drawn, especially in some of his writings which are not published in total, in the quality, from the mid-1930s all the way to 1940. I'm not going to mention the number of texts because they are not published. In which the same driving force, as he called it, will be seen as the only source of vitality capable of to enforce the liberal democratic values against the assaults of what he called barbarism and utilitarianism. According to him, the rational level of human mind, performing both an insight into man's practical needs and an anticipatory conceptual and imaginary function, can satisfactorily control the feelings or emotions surrounding them and inform them with proper intellectual elements. These are the emotions Collingwood called rational, intelligent, or lucid. Unless previously informed, this emotion by intellectual elements, this emotional energy cannot be expressed in an articulated form, or it will be very primitively expressed, like we just witnessed in the American case. And the emotional energy cannot be expressed, so as I said, in an articulate form, for on its own it would be just an amorphous, even destructive force. These informed emotions, when propagated, can induce in others, in a way analogous to rational thoughts, similar emotions, which, when aroused, become automatically intelligent or rational due to the rational form embedded in them. On the other hand, he closely associates the best achievements of human civilization with the values of liberalism and democracy, whose driving force or devotion to freedom, as he called it, was represented by the religious love of God, who set an absolute value on every individual human being. This was written in 1940. And he continues, in present times, the fascist and Nazi opponents of liberal democracy have somehow contrived to tap a source of energy, a driving power, which is close to the sympathizers of liberal democratic ideas. Fascism and Nazis may be silly, but those who believe in them intensely care enormously that they should win their fight, and win because they so greatly care to win it. Liberalism or democracy may be wise, but the people who care for it do not care for it passionately enough to make it survive. In the same spirit, in a text written by him in 1936 called Mad Was Mad, he attributed the weakness of liberalism to its failure to affect the inner life of community. In the same vein, and I'm going very soon to give the words to Stefan, Habermas was going to argue, summarizing many of his earliest writings on religion's role in the contemporary world, that freedom of religion represents a democratic solution to the challenges of religion's pluralism. Yet the state secularism is necessary, he says, but not sufficient, a condition for guaranteeing equal freedom for all. Relying on the mere goodwill of a secular authority that presently tolerates minorities discriminated before does not suffice any longer, especially in the present climate generated by religiously fueled extremism. Based on John Rawls' idea of public use of reason, Habermas builds his argument by stating that the parties concerned must reach agreement on the precarious delimitation between a positive liberty to practice one's own religion and a negative liberty to remain spared of the religious practices of the others. If tolerant principles is to be placed above any suspicion of discrimination, then equally accepted reasons must be found for what is understood tolerated and not tolerated attitude, behaviors, and actions. Fair arrangements can only be found if the parties involved learn to take also the perspective of the other. And the very procedure that fits this purpose best is the deliberate mode of democratic will formation. And this contains an epistemic dimension of a deliberation that grounds the presumption of rationally acceptable. Because we would like now to move a little bit to the contribution social of cyber communication and the internet communities. We will try to adapt these ideas to the context of social machines. And giving the to Stefan, I would say that there were studies done already on this, and that we make a distinction in what is called computer-assisted communication, which is an enforcement of the old system of communication, computers assisting the same way of learning and reproduction in a one-way transmission of ideas, and what is more using the so-called social machines, which expose interaction between the source of the means of the message, who can give feedback and contribute to the growth of this body of knowledge. And we wanted to connect this idea of social machines with the idea of the epistemic attitude would grow due to this two-way communication.
Florine, excuse me to interrupt you, but there are 7 minutes left for Stefan, or maybe, I don't know how you want to proceed.
Yes, now I'll let Stefan speak.
Thank you.
Okay, shall I continue with the...
Yes.
So, Florine, you basically explained the concept of social machines. They're software protocols that enable humans to interact with each other in such a way as to also provide automatic feedback. So humans are actually considered in a network computer nodes that provide information, create information, process information, not only hardware. The social machine is comprised of hardware networks plus the computational units or the processors or the computers that are humans. And what we wanted to see is basically we wanted to analyze the epistemic attitudes of religious individuals by looking at informational data. So in order to do this, we applied a new methodology, relative philosophy, called experimental philosophy. Experimental philosophy actually dates back to Plato, Socrates, Aristotle. So basically we look at the data and formulate hypotheses. You can usually formulate hypotheses beforehand, and we formulated a set of 4 hypotheses. The first hypothesis is that religion has a strong and far-reaching presence on the internet through social machines. Second is that religion is communicated within social machines so as to trigger informed emotions types of emotions that Lobont was previously talking about. The third one is that social machines enhance self-reflective religious epistemic attitudes through social learning processes. And the fourth and final hypothesis is that religion is communicated through social machines in a meaningful and attractive manner, with appeal to the younger members of the public cybersphere. Now, we picked several studies in order to get the data. We didn't make experiments ourselves. We had relevant studies to use as data in order to confirm or falsify our hypothesis. What we also did is correlated the number of YouTube fans of certain religious YouTube channels and see if there is any correlation between their attitudes and what this can and what the information of what this information can inform us about our hypothesis. So the conclusion is that we have found relevant information derived from the studies and also from the YouTube data. And we can say to a certain extent that religion does have a strong and far-reaching presence on the internet through social machines. There are lots of people who subscribe to YouTube channels, who look up the information about religion on Wikipedia, who interact on the internet, being influenced by religious attitudes as well. And that religion is also communicated within social machines so as to trigger informed emotions. There was a study that actually looked at how individuals felt given information of congregational activities and how internet activity improved their spiritual life. And there was quite a significant relation there. And then the data also back the third hypothesis, which is that social machines enhance self-reflective religious epistemic attitudes through social learning processes. So in a study, people would be fed religious information and they started self-reflecting, feeling in a certain way, acting in certain ways. However, more problematic was fourth hypothesis is that religion is communicated with social machines in a meaningful and attractive manner. Here we actually, yes, number 4. So hypothesis 1, 2, and 4 were strongly backed by the evidence, whereas number 3, that's the social machines have self-reflective epistemic attitudes, was a bit problematic. However, the third hypothesis still needs further empirical support, such as from future research that might take into consideration current knowledge, how social networks, the report of social networks with cognitive performance, and more elaborate studies on this, probably correlated to some fMRI data and integrated so as to get a higher, get a stronger evidence for hypothesis number 3. And I'll leave Florin to conclude.
Yeah, because the time is almost up. We can say that comparing this with what we call social networks, the studies done on social networks, prove so far that social networks like Facebook or other, Twitter, contribute more to general emotional state of well-being or familiarity, group connection. The social machines tend to also elevate or look at least to us a bit more adequate in terms we try to define at the beginning of the paper, like the proper transmitters of intelligent emotions, which would also transport information and will build a proper epistemic attitude. So that's the idea towards which we are aiming to continue our study and try to enforce it with more empirical information in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you very much.